Hey, this is Steve from Shire Studios, and I want to welcome you to the first of many videos that's going to feature myself and Chris Peters, who is a good friend of mine. We've been in many bands together over the years. We're going to be talking about various musical topics, whatever we come up with, for the week, and you guys will sit back and enjoy it. So, without further ado, I apologize for this first video, which was kind of just to make sure we can get through it and see how we're going to do. My video is a little bit blurry on my end. I'm not sure why. I'll figure that out. I think I also need to work on my breathing habits while I talk, and I'll deal with that. But anyway, sit back and enjoy this first one and many more to come. Thanks. All right, Chris, why don't you start us off with and they don't have to be in any particular order. These are just, 5 albums that kind of hit you in the 80s and stood out for some reason.
So what if we steal each other's? Then you've got some.
And here's to our first video.
Right. As well. Here's to you. All right.
What do you mean steal each other?
If we pick the same one, wouldn't that be something?
It'll probably happen.
We don't know each other's top 5 at this point. It's a secret to both of us.
Yeah. What's the fun?
So the excitement is building. All right, my number 5, I actually put these in order, is AC/DC Back in Black. And the reason I picked it was mostly just because how hard it hit me. I mean, I was a fan of AC/DC when Bon Scott died. I was like, what's going to happen now? And then Back in Black hit, which is obviously a tribute to Bon Scott. Just blew me away. I mean, just all the great songs that were on that album. Hell's Bells, the beginning of it, was great. Ended with Rock and Roll, Noise Pollution. You Shook Me All Night Long. Let's Put the Love Into It. Can you think of any others on there, Steve? I can't.
Yeah, we will, because it's one of my choices too. So.
Oh, it is? Okay. I mean, it was just a great album. Clean, knock your balls off.
Yeah.
I'll let you take over from there. There you go. What's your favorite song on that one?
So some of the other songs were Shoot to Thrill, What Do You Do for Money, Honey, Give the Dog a Bone, Giving the Dog a Bone, Let Me Put My Love Into You, You Shook Me All Night Long. Of course, I can't really listen to that one anymore, but Have a Drink on Me, Shake a Leg, Rock and Roll, Noise Pollution. I mean, great album, great production. And the reason it really kicked my ass, I would say, was I was, I guess, a freshman in high school. And my older brother, that's who Chris knew, Marty, had a foosball table. And him and his buddies used to go to bars on Friday and Saturday nights and play foosball and win all kinds of money because they were really good. But they were practice before they would go to the bars at my parents' house. And they would have this album on, like, cranked up maximum every night before they would go out for at least a year. So it got ingrained in my head. And I did know about AC/DC before that, but I wasn't a big fan. I mean, I was just a kid growing up. So this one really hit me hard. And like I said, that one year when they were playing foosball every night, I would just listen to this thing, and I would sit and just be, of course, you'd always sit and look at the big album covers right back then, the vinyl, but there wasn't a whole lot to look at this one. But yeah, huge impact. And I think
that album just makes you feel like you're the king of the world when you crank it up. It's just the other thing you learned is like just how, I think it was where they kind of really put together how great of songwriters they were on that album. I mean, previously they had great songs, but to write these songs and it probably helped with the producer, who I don't actually remember who it is. Do you? Is it Mutt Lange? Mutt Lange, yeah. It was produced in a way that just was radio ready. I mean.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Crazy good.
Okay, so what's your next? You go next, Steve. Well,
that was my choice, so it's back up to you.
Okay. All
I mean, that was one of my choices, so we just.
This is gonna be kind of fun because I'm gonna steal all your thunder.
We'll see. But you might. I'm sure that you'll. Well, I'm probably sure you'll have maybe two more.
Okay. All right. Well, my number 4 top album of the 80s is Appetite for Destruction, Guns N' Roses.
I'll cue it up.
Yeah. There you go. What can you say? I mean, it was their first album. You know, from what I learned later, it seemed so unlikely that they were even ever become stars because they were such fuck ups. I mean, they literally just,
Yeah, you look at some of those early photos.
Yeah, I mean, no, I don't. Yeah, I just mean just in general. Like, I don't think they really thought they were just in the Sunset Strip and playing, and all of a sudden they had these great songs. And I don't really know the exact story of how they got signed, but they could have been anybody. And I think a lot of them had moved to L.A. Probably it would have been after you were there, right? Way after.
It was during the same time, and I'll get to that in a sec. Yeah.
Yeah. But obviously, Welcome to the Jungle. I mean, when you heard that and you heard Axl's just scream, it was just unbelievable. And to me, that's one of the first songs and real rock bands that I remember from MTV, like a video that I actually thought was cool and wasn't cheesy and stupid.
Right.
It was like in most of their videos, at least Welcome to the Jungle was them playing live on a stage, and it was like, all right, this is who I like. And at the time, still being a hard rock fan, it just spoke to you in a way. It just replaced some of the crappy music that was on the radio at the time.
Yeah, the early 80s were rough.
Yeah, it was. And, it just kind of blew up all over the place. And, I kind of forgot about Guns N' Roses a little bit, and some of their subsequent albums were good. But this one, I mean, it's just a classic and just a great band that unfortunately self-imploded fairly quickly right after that. But what did you like about that album, Steve?
Well, I still remember. Well, so yeah, I was living in LA at the time. They were probably recording the album, but I had moved home before when the album came out. So I remember seeing the Welcome to the Jungle video and thinking this, the same thing you were. It's like, holy crap, what the hell is this? Look at these guys. I mean, all you used to see, up until then was the big hair and the costumes and the dancing on stage. And I was witness to some of that while I was living in LA, but these guys came out and they just really kicked ass. And then the owner of the store I worked at in LA apparently was an extra in that video. So I had heard he was an extra in this video for a band called Guns N' Roses. And I said, well, I've never heard of them. And they said, well, the video's coming out. So I remember seeing the video and thinking about the owner and stuff like that. But I remember vividly I was sitting in the chair in my parents' living room and watching MTV, and Sweet Child of Mine came on. And when that was done, I couldn't believe it. I just wanted to call them and say, play it again. And, that really hit me hard, that whole video, just the way it was shot, the song itself, the guitar solo, just crazy. And then, obviously picked up the album. My favorite song, Rocket Queen, which finishes it off. But Paradise City.
Does that fade into another song, too?
Which one?
Doesn't Rocket Queen fade into another song?
Well, it fades into an ending of the song, but it's still the same song. Okay. Obviously, Paradise City, I really couldn't, really don't want to listen to it anymore, but it's still a great song. But the rest of them, Night Train, great song. You listen to this album and you hear him just swearing and stuff, and
you kind of felt like, right? You kind of felt like that. That they were, I don't know how to say this, like they were the common man, like that you could be them, that they're real people. They weren't just the snooty rock stars away somewhere and it was real. It was really them. And they were there. You could go to a bar somewhere in LA and actually see them, And I saw them when they first came to, I believe it was Music Hall when they first came, and it was, kind of real early word of the mouth, and it was just blown, just amazing. Yeah, they were they were probably the best the band was then, you know.
Yeah, I think so. Those few years with right up until the Use Your Illusion was good. Maybe the double album they shouldn't have done. Maybe they should have done a single and kept it tight. But yeah, this album just kicked ass. And you know, after
I was a huge Izzy fan too. I thought he really added a lot to the band, more than he's probably given credit for.
oh sure, know? He wrote a lot of those early riffs.
Yeah.
But you know, I lived out in L.A. and between 83 and 87, and he just got tired of listening, you know, seeing all the dressing up and the hair and the, you know, just the glam stuff, and the music really wasn't that good. It was just pop, where these guys were, you know, were coming for blood, and they did a kick-ass job. So yeah, that was it.
I actually went to see
oh, I got another story.
Izzy. I went to see Izzy with the Juju Hounds when he first left the band. And, you know, I knew he was in Guns N' Roses. I didn't know as much as I know now about him, and it was like, this guy is kick ass, and he was just the rhythm guitar in Guns N' Roses, you know. But I mean, it just goes to show you how talented some of these bands are. You think, oh, they're lucky to make it. Not really. I mean,
yeah, there's all
really good.
They put their time and effort in, and you know, it pays off. Just like our good buddy Eddie Van Halen and all the work he did, God rest his soul. But we'll talk about him in a second. Yeah, I want to finish up the Guns N' Roses thing with they came in 1991. They came to Cleveland in June of '91, so it was before the albums came out, the Use Your Illusions. And I didn't have tickets, and it was 2 shows they did. And the first show, a guy I knew who I worked with had just gone that night, scalped tickets, and went to the show. So I talked to my sister and I said, "Hey, let's do that." And she's like, I don't know. I said, "Come on, let's just do it. If we don't get in, we come home and we forget about it." So we went. We got there so early. We parked in the very first spot of the old Coliseum, Richfield Coliseum. Got out of the car, and there's a kid sitting there on a railroad tie or a little parking spot, concrete block there, and he stands up. He says, "You guys looking for tickets?" "Yeah, we are." "What do you got?" He says, "I got center stage row, like W or something." It's like, okay. So we bought the tickets within like 5 minutes of being there, but we were there for like 3 hours early. So we had to kill a bunch of time, but yeah, we got center seats right on the floor. Great show. Izzy was still in the band, so yeah, good memories there.
Awesome.
All right, let's see if we can go 3 for 3.
Okay, sure you don't want to go first?
All right, I'll go first this time.
Okay.
And I'll pick one that you probably didn't pick. So I'm going to go a little bit more to the heavy metal genre, to an album I thought, when I first heard probably the most popular song off of it, I was blown away. And then there was a song, another song on the album that I heard shortly after that, and was like, holy crap, what is this? And it's a Metallica, Master of Puppets. So I think for them it was a really big breakout album. You know, when I first heard the song Master of Puppets, I was like, holy crap, I was over a friend's house at a party, and he goes, "You got to listen to this," and just cranked it up, and it was, you know, holy crap. And then the song Welcome Home Sanitarium, which I thought was just crazy good, with the nice slow mellow intro, and just a great written song. And then there's, you know, Disposable Heroes, which is really well written. Damage Incorporated, The Thing That Should Not Be. I mean, it's just a breakout album to me for them. It got me into the band, and I've been a fan ever since. Yeah, they've done some different types of material over the last 20 years after the Black album, but yeah, that one really, as far as that thrashy heavy metal, that was the first band that I liked in that genre. So that was, but still, that came out in '86, I believe, and yeah, but I probably didn't get into them until around 1990. But that started me off into a whole another realm of listening to different types of music. So that one's special to me.
Cool. I agree. I love that album. It's is Battery on that one?
Yeah, Batteries on that one.
Probably my favorite. That's I haven't listened to it in a long time, but just they were almost, to me, they were almost like speed metal.
Yeah, and up until then, I was only into just classic rock,
Right. Yeah, it was not the Metallica that you hear now, really. And I'm not for or against Metallica now, but that was truly like punk and metal and speed metal all mixed together, and it was just multiple layers of songs that had different parts, and just fantastic.
Yeah, it was almost a cross between thrash metal and progressive rock.
Right.
They did mix it up a lot, and some different time signatures, and very good. All right, back to Chris.
Yep. Okay. All right. So my next pick is actually from 1980. So
it fits.
And it's the Pretenders' first album.
Okay.
Called Pretenders. And just for one, I've always had a thing for female singers. And the fact that she was from Ohio paid a little more attention. Chrissie Hynde's from Akron, Ohio. And in their songs, she would sing about it. Precious was a great song. Tattooed Love Boys was my favorite. It was kind of punk, but it was also a bit more sophisticated songwriting. And I love the way the guitar player and the drummer and the bass player was a three-piece, basically, with a chick lead singer, played. You kind of felt like they were short songs, and the what the songs were about, you could tell she was actually just singing from her experiences, from having moved to London and sort of living in that scene. And it made me feel kind of dangerous when I was listening to it. I know that sounds probably hokey, but it kind of took you right to that scene and made you feel like you were a part of it. And I'm a sucker for well-written pop songs.
Yeah.
So having the punk edge to it and the feel like it was dangerous, but also being well put together. It's by far my favorite Pretenders album.
Yeah, we've been listening to maybe 2 or 3 years ago, Greatest Hits, and it's got 30 songs on it or something, and I let that one roll, and it's just a great hour and a half of hit after hit after hit, and if it's not a hit, it's still a great song. They certainly had a chemistry, And
I had heard that, I think Chrissie Hynde had once said that she was a journalist before, I think like a music critic in the London scene, and she kind of came to the conclusion that instead of writing about it, that she should actually sing about it. And it translated perfectly just for that scene.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Are they still together? Do you know?
They are still together. Unfortunately, obviously, everybody knows that James Honeyman Scott and I forget his first name. I think his last name was Ferriton. They both died of heroin overdoses after the second album. And I mean, they were never quite the same.
Right.
It was just energy that those guys brought to this thing. The same rhythm, the same drummer, and obviously Chrissie Hynde are still in it. But the energy that those two guys brought was just, phenomenal. Obviously, guitar and bass and that kind of music is important.
Yeah, and they came along at a time where you had MTV. That helped them propel themselves into the market a little bit more. Some great videos. Well, if they had great videos, I don't think any video was really great. I wish MTV would have never happened, but
yeah. I mean, some of them were cool, some of them weren't. It's we could have a whole show about that, I suppose. Yeah,
we'll do that down the road.
But yeah, the Pretenders. Give it a
All
spin.
right. This one might be on your list. This one's probably on 95% of the people's list out there, and that's Rush Moving Pictures.
Not on my list,
So,
but a great one.
I mean, this is a huge album for the band. Obviously, you know, the one before it, Permanent Waves, you know, kind of set the stage with songs like Spirit of the Radio. But then this one came out, and it was all, except for the Camera Eye, all these songs are short, you know, 4 or 5 minutes. Red Barchetta, 6 minutes. But Tom Sawyer, Red Barchetta, and Limelight, I mean, 3 huge songs for this band off of one record. That's you know, doesn't happen all that much, and hits. And then an instrumental like YYZ, which really meant a lot to that band, because I don't know if you know the story, but when they were flying, actually Alex was flying them home back to Toronto, and they were calling into the airport, which is YYZ as they call it in Canada. And they were using a Morse code kind of a thing, which is that's the beginning of that song. And of course, Neil Peart sitting there in the plane picked up on that and said, "Hey, that would make a great beat," or maybe it was Geddy, who knows? But someone thought it would be a great beat, and that's how they actually wrote that song. So that's kind of a cool story. I saw this in tour, which was it, 2012 maybe, at the Gund Arena in Cleveland, where they played the entire album. That was quite an experience. Geddy's voice still, you know, was a little rough, but musically they were right on it. But still, I remember back in the day, 81, 82, walking down Headlands Beach, and back in the day, that was the times of, you know, boom boxes, and all you would hear as you'd go from group of kids to group of kids was boom boxes after boom box playing WMMS, and they would, you know, Tom Sawyer would be on the radio, and just kind of a huge memory of those times. Not only is it a great album, but brings back a lot of good memories of those early 80s.
Yeah, great album. I agree. It's Rush is obviously one of my favorite bands. I too have seen them play more times than I can remember. Although the last time I think it was when they had it was a couple tours they had the washing machines on stage.
I think they've had them more than one tour, but
yeah, they did a couple. My old boss had a Dodge Viper, and he'll remain nameless, but he was a huge Rush fan, and so we took a little trip and we went to 3 different shows, which was just amazing. Columbus, Indianapolis, and Chicago, and 3 successive nights. And we took the Viper, which was fun. And it was just amazing. I mean, just to see I had never done that. I don't know if you ever have, where you actually see a band followed up, you know, from one to another. Usually you just see it on, you know, Cleveland when they come through. But it was just amazing just to feed off the crowd in a different town. And it was, you know, just a really fun experience that I'll always remember.
No, that's cool. I've never done that. I've seen them from different towns where I've lived, but the first time I saw Rush was 1985, and I think I've seen them 5 or 6 times total, and nothing but great things, you know, obviously from that band live. I do remember one time we saw them, Alex did mess up the beginning of Spirit of the Radio, and I'm sure that happens from time to time. You know, it's like diddly 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 diddly. It's like
he wouldn't expect that you would remember that.
You know, that's the only thing I remember out of the 5 shows. You know? Yeah, that back in the day.
At least you know it wasn't recorded.
Yeah, there was no cell phones back then. Thank God.
No, I mean, like, he wasn't, you know, playing to a backing track.
For him, yeah. No, for us and all the stuff we used to do back then. Good thing there was no cell phones, but yeah, I'm sure he's, you know, they've all messed up along the way, various shows. But I remember, you know, Chris Lanzo, he's the biggest Rush fan I know. He's a good friend of mine, and he was there, and he just looked at me and he's like, "Did you hear that?" He screwed it up. But yeah, my only complaint about the last show was, you know, Geddy's voice just couldn't quite hit those those really high notes of the early, the 70s songs. But hey, it is what it is.
Neither can I.
Yeah. Yeah, sure you can. All right, who's up?
Yeah.
You're up.
I actually, I play, as you know, Steve, but the people watching would know I play in a couple of bands now. And, as you get older, you really have to do a lot more preparation for shows. And one of the things that I've done for the last couple of years is, really putting in a lot of warm up, a good 45 minutes warming up your voice just to be able to hit certain notes. The days of walking on stage and just, a beer in your hand and just hit go and you can sing that stuff. Unless you constantly keep that stuff up, it's difficult to do. So I really do understand, how some of these musicians have to change keys on the songs or you end up like Elton, but I digress. Let's move on.
It's all true. I think you're up.
Okay. All right. So my next pick is probably, as I think about it, possibly a continuation of the last pick in the Pretenders. And as you mentioned earlier, the early 80s was just really horrible music.
It was. Yeah.
I don't know what you would call it, new romanticism or whatever, Duran Duran, Spandau Ballet, all that, I don't know, stuff. It was just, and in 1983, along came a band called U2 and an album called War. And it was just really like a kick in the gut to that pussy music.
Yep.
and I was kind of in that Pretenders kind of mode and, looking for something that had a little bit of balls to it and a little bit of aggression and excitement. And, I think that was their first album that really just hit home for me. Sunday Bloody Sunday, New Year's Day, Two Hearts Beat as One. Just, I don't know how you would even describe that music. I mean, and the guitars, it's sort of like, I don't know, like a helicopter guitar. Like it's just, chiming.
Crafted the sound, yeah.
Yeah, and that album just completely blew me away. It seemed like it was obviously they were better songwriters than a lot of the early punk, but it was kind of an update to punk rock again. Kind of maybe took it on a little further from when the Pretenders did, and obviously the Pretenders fell apart. So it was, and these guys were, they were 20 years old. They were from Ireland, and they were literally like, I don't know, you think of somebody like Black Sabbath, that they were really just trying to get out of their desolate town.
Yeah.
And you could just feel it in those songs, especially Sunday Bloody Sunday. And I remember the video for New Year's Day was one of my favorites back in the day, where that was in the snow and the horses riding and the band in the snow. It was just a really, really cool visual for me.
Great band. I remember going to LA to visit my brother, like 1983. And I don't know if we were getting picked up or dropped off to go back home. But I remember that one of the guys that was with us was talking about U2, this new band he's been listening to that's going to take over the world. And yeah, he was right. But I hadn't heard of them up until that point. So that was 83. So that was with their second album, War?
Second or third. And I think that actually came from, a time when I think there was a lot of war going on. Actually, that's why it was called War. I think things were going on in Poland at the time, and over in that area, I think there was a lot of just war and aggression and people fighting. And I think that album, as being young kids, that sort of had an impression on them, and that was really what they, obviously, Sunday Bloody Sunday, was just sort of their answer to that.
I got to see U2 one time. Great show. I think that was early 90s. What was was it the Zoo Tour maybe? I don't know. They had a bunch of TVs.
Yeah, that was Zoo. I didn't see that one. No. I saw them once. I don't remember what tour it was though. But it was amazing, obviously. They played in the round in the middle of the Coliseum.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I know when I saw them, they had a stage that had come out. you know, like an extension of the stage, but they still most of the time were on the main stage. But I can't remember what song, but they came out on this little stage, and there was a tiny stage at the end, and they played a song or two out there. But yeah, it was a good show. All right, yeah, U2. We're gonna go from U2 to to this band, and this was the band's third album, and I picked it because they just got a new singer, and they went from being a good band to being a phenomenal band, and that's Iron Maiden, Number of the Beast. So this is where you get the the song Number of the Beast, which is just crazy good. This Bruce Dickinson coming out with his wailing vocals and such a great tone in his voice for this type of music. The very, it's almost, I know it's not all sung about medieval times, but it certainly sounds like that type of music, that feeling it gives you. But the songs Children of the Damned, 22 Acacia Avenue, Hallowed Be Thy Name, which is just a live, staple for this band, and it's just crazy good. Run to the Hills, I mean, it completely changed the landscape of British heavy metal, at the time. So I think it was a huge addition to that band, and obviously changed them forever. I really didn't get into the band until later on, so I missed the time that this did come out. But in the later 80s, I did get into it, and obviously, once you get this one, I think this was the first one I got. Then I was getting in succession, all the rest of them that they had put out up until that point in time. And that each one has their own charm, but this one still, I can put this one on, and I don't know. It's just great song after great song. There's no filler on this thing. I don't know if you've into Iron Maiden at all, but
I really haven't listened to that, a lot of it. So I don't have a whole lot of comment on it, but obviously a great band. What was that concert video that they have that was been played around lately over the last couple of years?
Flight 666.
Yeah, I think that might be it. Just amazing. Bruce
got his pilot's license, years ago, but then he kept going up and up and up, and now he can fly the big boys, and he actually flies them around. Flies the whole crew around on tour now. So not only is he the main singer, or the main lead guy for the band, but he also flies them from town to town. So I wonder if he gets paid extra for that. What does he charge the band? Okay, those are my top 5. Do you have one more?
I do. And then I actually have one that we've all missed. But I'll see if you
I've got some honorable mentions here, yeah.
So going from 1983, and it's really, again, when you started this off, you said, this is our own personal sort of storytelling.
Yeah, it's all it came from.
Right around this time, a band came along that probably changed my life, and really had an effect on my own songwriting. And it was a band called REM, and it was an album called Murmur. Just, 1983, we were talking a little bit ago about U2 and the Pretenders, and this band just kind of came out of nowhere, Georgia, and they had a sound that at first glance it's kind of sleepy, and you didn't really know what the fuck he was singing about, because you couldn't even understand the words a lot of the time, or they didn't make any sense or coherent sense. But you kind of got into it a little bit deeper. You realized that it was kind of that way on purpose, and a lot that they were singing about was actually sort of esoteric you had to kind of think a little deeper.
Yep.
to really think what they were about. It was sort of more of an old-fashioned sounding record, and just some of my favorite songs: Radio for Europe, Talk About the Passion, Perfect Circle. I don't know if you're really familiar with it.
Yeah, I love REM. I mean, I've got a lot of their albums. I don't have them all, but
Right. It was a, you know, it's hard to describe the band to people because none of the people in the band, there wasn't like, oh, that lead guitar player. You know, Peter Buck was a good rhythm guitar player that played very different than everyone else. Sort of a, what do you call it when you skip strings?
cheating.
Certain kind of playing where you play, you know, across strings and then up again.
Sweeping.
Yeah, yeah, and it's, you know, he just played very differently, and I think, you know, if you hear from where they kind of came from, they were, you know, obviously you hear the Byrds and you hear some of that kind of material, but they were also affected by some of those early '80s bands as well, or late '70s like Gang of Four, those type of bands. So it was kind of a mismatch of all that into, you know, sort of a college band that, you know, kind of went on to do it their own way and never sold out, never, you know, did anything, any kind of music or any album or any song that they didn't want to do. They did it their way. You know, they were offered record contracts and they never really took a big one until the real very end when it was their way of doing it.
Right.
When they signed with Warner Brothers. But, you know, this was just the start of a whole genre of music that I could just go on and say, you know, a whole bunch of my favorite bands really were probably created, you know, listening to this album.
Yep. Yeah, I didn't like them at first, and that's only because I was too, you know, single-minded into classic rock at the time. But as the '80s drew to a close, do you know my friend Ron Van Winkle? He kind of turned me on to REM, and I think I still have one of his CDs. Don't tell him. And it's an REM one, yes. But yeah, that he kind of got me off onto that into that realm of REM type music. So yeah, at the end of the '80s is where I branched out into a lot of different types of music. You know, I was stuck in the classic rock growing up in the '70s and having 4 older siblings, and you know, the early '80s, like we talked about before, just kind of, you know, the radio stations around here in Cleveland all switched to this, you know, crap music. And I remember they would have classic rock weekends, you know, and you looked forward to that just so you could hear some good music on the radio. But yeah, REM was certainly one that in the late '80s I got into, and that certainly that type of music, you know, going on from there. But love the band. I was going to pick an REM one actually, but I did not. So.
You can definitely tell that REM was from the South. It's more kind of a lazy, you know, and you could pass them off as just kind of a fluff band, you know, folky fluff band. But, you know, they really had a lot more behind them if you take the time to investigate them.
Yeah, and I got the opportunity in 1993 to move to Athens, Georgia. Not move permanently, but the company I was working for at the time wanted me to go down there for 3 months. We had another office down there, and they put me up in an apartment in Athens, and you know, it was a college town, so there was a lot of things happening, which was a lot of fun. But so I got to at least experience that town for a few months, see where they came from. All right. What's that?
I said, I bet that was cool.
Yeah, it was a good time. I was only, I don't know, 1993. I was a lot younger than I am now. We'll just say that. So, all right, we're running pretty long here, so let's just wrap this up by throwing in some honorable mentions. And I don't have a copy of it here, but one of the ones that I wanted to talk about is an honorable mention, and it's appropriate as of what happened yesterday with Eddie Van Halen. But I think Van Halen's 1984 was a big album, you know, big change for the band with all the keyboards and the songs like All Wait and Jump, and you know, they were still the kick-ass rockers, like little guitars, and what's the other? I can't remember the other ones on that one now. Drawing a blank. Anyway, great album. Too bad that was the last one. But I want to follow that up with the next album that they came out with, Sammy. You know, 5150. Huge album for that band. And totally, to me, I always think of those as two separate bands. I mean, you don't get that Eddie Van Halen sound with David Lee Roth. He switched tones when he started playing with Sammy, and he never really got it back until they did that album in 2012 back with David Lee Roth. But still, to me, those two albums are huge. You know, the one going out and the one.
Did they put out an album in 2012?
Yeah. They got back together, and you know, a lot of it was songs that they had written back in the 70s that never made it onto an album that they kind of resurrected, but there was some new stuff as well. And who really cares? It was the band playing again.
I'll have to listen to that. I didn't even know it existed.
Yeah, it was great to hear. And like I said, when Eddie left, or when Dave left, Eddie's tone changed in my mind. But when they put that album out in 2012, that tone was back, that aggression, that, you know, whatever he had back in the late 70s.
Wait, so what was the album? The first, was it OU812 or no?
First one was 5150.
5150. I just remember listening to OU812 when I was on vacation on the beach. And I just remember listening to that album and just thinking, how good is this band? You know, I thought at that point they were ready to really take over the world, which they kind of did. But, you know, I think egos kind of got in the way after a while on that one. But
yeah,
Eddie Van Halen, I mean, when you first heard the first Van Halen album, I mean, just that guitar sound was just something that, unless you were really into metal, you just had never heard before. I mean, it was just a whole style and genre, and, you know, the way the guitar sounded was just, I mean, it's kind of the way kids in the age of, you know, the 90s felt about Teen Spirit and Nirvana. It was like the opening chords. It's like the opening chords of the first Van Halen album. You're just like, what the fuck is this?
Yeah, I still remember, I think I was in 7th grade in school, and I remember staying in at lunch and listening to, because someone brought their album in, and we were just looking at it, and you know, each class had a little record player. It was a crappy record player, but I remember putting it on there and listening to the whole album, which was only 30 minutes long. But during lunch that day, you know, jaws on the floor as 7th graders, and we were guitar players at the time, and it's like, oh man, we're screwed. We better get practicing.
Yeah, we're not going to impress any girls now.
Yeah, all right, rest in peace, Eddie. So, all right, I'll run through these. I think another big one was obviously the addition of Ronnie James Dio to Black Sabbath after Ozzy left. I think, you know,
I love that.
Was it a game changer album? No, but I think it was a game changer for the band. What a great sound. I mean, after Never Say Die, which was, I still like Never Say Die album, but it was a totally different sounding album than anything they had done. And when they came out with this is back to extreme heavy, just driving songs. And then, you know, Ronnie James Dio's vocals, I loved him in Rainbow. And when I saw this and heard this, it's like, okay, that's crazy.
I love that album.
To follow that up, you know, I don't have the actual Ozzy album, but the first Ozzy album, you know, after leaving Black Sabbath.
Wizard of Oz?
Was that the first one?
I think so.
Yeah, and then Diary of a Madman was after that, right? So yeah, I mean, those are two albums by, you know, a band that was kind of split up, you know, with Ozzy leaving, and then they both came out of it, you know, really well. Go to the late 80s, and a brand new kind of band on the scene, which was Dream Theater. So this was their first album with a different singer, the only album they made with this singer. But a totally different type of music, you know, Rush to the 10th degree or nth degree. And they just went on to make so many great albums. Another band at the end of the 80s is Soundgarden. You know, the beginning of grunge, if you want to call them grunge. I still think they're more rock than grunge, but boy, the albums that came after this one, incredible, but this was 89, so heading out of the 80s, a great band to follow with Pearl Jam, and I'm not a big Nirvana fan, but Nirvana. And to start the 80s, one of my favorite, and a lot of people hate this album, but to me, I bought it, and this is what I listened to like that whole summer. You know, our family had a boat, and I would ride around listening to this Emotional Rescue by the Rolling Stones. Probably the only good album of the 80s to me in the Rolling Stones. I mean, come on, Tattoo Use is way overplayed, and it's not that good of an album.
Some Girls is my favorite.
Yeah, it's the 70s, though. You know, this is
yeah.
the 80s. So there, those are my honorable.
They probably thought it was still the 70s.
I think this was 80, 81. I don't know. Anyway, so that's it.
So I'm only have one, and I didn't know if this was only pertained to rock, but I don't think you can talk about the greatest albums ever of the 80s and not mention Thriller by Michael Jackson.
No,
I'm not a huge fan.
Yeah,
every song on that album was great. Thriller, Billie Jean, PYT, Beat It. I mean,
the solo from Eddie Van Halen.
Yeah, just, you know, maybe one of the greatest albums ever. And like I say, I'm not a huge Michael Jackson fan, but unless you're dead, you would have to tap your feet along to most of that album.
You can't deny it. I'm going to go out of screen here to get a picture.
Just a great album, and that's the last time I'm going to mention Michael Jackson on this show.
Yeah. We'll see. Let's hold him to that, people. No, so with Eddie Van Halen passing away, I thought about this photo from years ago. So when I was living in LA in 1986, my sister came out to visit, and my brother was going to take her shopping. You know, she wanted to go shopping in Beverly Hills, Rodeo Drive, or whatever. So he was going to take her, and he said, "Hey, do you want to go?" And I said, "Nah, I'd rather go to work." So eventually in their travels, I don't know where this was, I can't remember, but they were in a pet store. And they happened to see Eddie Van Halen and Valerie Bertinelli buying a puppy. Nice. So they said, my sister said, "Hey, can I have a photo with you?" And he took a photo with her, and then she goes, "Oh, let me take a picture of you with your dog." So this was that photo.
Awesome.
Got a great smile, holding the puppy.
He looks pretty young in that. How old do you think he was? Early 20s?
Well, he's got to be around 30. This was 1986.
Oh, okay.
So I'm going to guess about 30.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, who would do that, Put on a great smile, holding the dog, just, yep, go ahead. So thank you to that. I'm sure you made my sister's trip.
Yeah.
She didn't care to see us.
And what's the lesson that you learned from that, Steve?
Always go shopping with your sister.
Yeah, and skip work for it too.
Yeah.
Next time,
my brother was my boss too. He's like, "Come on, just take off. We'll get someone to fill in for you." I'm like, "I don't want to go walk around in malls all day." Well, guess what? So I got screwed. So I think she made a copy of that for me just to piss me off. So.
Yeah.
But no, good thing that he did that for her. But bad thing he's gone from us. What a legacy he leaves behind, I mean,
right. And 2020 kills another rock star, huh? Yeah, it's just,
God's band's getting better.
Yeah, we need to skip ahead a couple of months and get to 2021 already.
Neil Peart and Eddie are now jamming together.
Yeah, that's crazy.
All right, well, let's wrap this up. It's almost been an hour, so don't want to drag it on too long. Thanks for everyone who's going to watch this in the future.